welcome everyone to our second session in this four-part series that we're calling Chaos to Clarity, building a unified data strategy on Azure. And for those of you who joined us for the first one, it's great to see you guys again. And for anyone joining, for the first time, we will be sharing the link to the first session in the chat, so you guys can feel free to review that recording as well at your own time after this session. And before we get started, just cover a few housekeeping items about how we're going to run the session today. The first thing, just like last time, we will be recording this session, and we will share this recording with everyone who is registered after the call or after the session. And also, as you guys will notice, all your mics and audio have been muted. But we do want to encourage participation and engagement throughout the session. So feel free to use the Q&A panel or the chat to pop any questions that you may have as we go along. And we will try and address them at the end of the session if there's time, or if not, we will respond to all the questions and send out a collated reply at the end. And again, if there's anything else that you see or hear about today that you want more information about, you can feel free to reach out to the email address that's here. And we'll be feel free to we'll forward off your questions to Neha and she can respond to those. So introducing kind of our speakers for today. My name is Vaibhav Mal. I'm the Vice President at Optimus. I'm just here to kind of set this up. The main star of the show today is Neha Sharma from Microsoft. She is a data and AI specialist at Microsoft, and she really helps organizations, unlock the power of their data architecture and AI-driven solutions. Her main focus is Microsoft Fabric, and she, really helps healthcare and government customers to streamline their data infrastructure, accelerate digital transformation, and really enable those impactful insights. So we're really excited to have her here today and talk a lot about Fabric. Um, Also, just a quick, reminder about who we are as Optimus. We've been around for 14 years. We are an Azure-only partner. We've worked with over 150 satisfied clients all across North America. And the way we like to work with our customers is we like to engage in long-standing relationships with them, and really act as an extension of their internal team. And we support them with our delivery centers that are all across the world. We have offices in Canada, India, Argentina, and Brazil. And we really, really pride ourselves on the deep, technical expertise that we bring to the table, so that we can help the customers in whatever they may be wanting to do. And just to kind of cover what areas we really work on, we have the cloud infrastructure, the app dev side, and of course, what we're discussing here today, the data and AI one. And all through, across all three of those, we work with them all the way from their planning to implementation, optimization, management. Really, our focus is to, as I said before, become really an integral part of their team, and really focus on success together, how we can grow together with them. So before getting into kind of the session for today, I just want to do a quick recap for those of you who are not able to join the first session about why we're doing this series to begin with and kind of what we covered in session one. So the main goal of this series is to address kind of the challenges that we're seeing in the market and the customers that we speak to around the data and AI. And what we find is that a lot of organizations that have kind of grown organically find themselves in a very, there are a few like specific scenarios that we are seeing over and over, right? Where they have siloed data sources, they have lack of formal governance, they have inefficient reporting or analytics. And really it's affecting their business because they're not able to react or predict where they should be going. So what we want to do is through this series is kind of take a customer who is facing these challenges and kind of walk you through what is the journey that looks like to get them to a modern data strategy that allows for easy and real-time analytics that are powered by even AI and all the enhancements we're seeing in that space. So the way we want to do that is there are four stages that we've identified at Optimus that kind of help you through that journey. The first one being the unification of your data estate, right? Taking all these siloed data sources, collating them, and kind of bringing your data into one single source of truth. The next step, which is the session we'll be covering today, is now that you have all your data in one place, how do you transform and manage that data so that it can be best consumed by your users and your internal customers to really bring that value out. The third step, which will be the next session we'll be doing, is then how to work on that data, how to create those dashboards, those reports, how to enable those that the AI and natural language models onto that data. And then the last step session that we'll be covering is kind of how we do all of this in a seamless way, putting security and governance at the forefront. So the way we are going to do this, and this is again just kind of what we covered in session one. Like I said, we covered the unification of your data, and there were two key components that we kind of covered in session one. One was the Azure Integration Services. Those are the set of tools that allow you to seamlessly integrate the various data sources we were talking about and bring that data into one place. And the other thing we covered was the event-driven architecture, which is more a kind of new paradigm in architecting your solutions, right? Which allows you your system to react to events in real time and also help you synchronize data across various systems, again, in real time, reacting to specific events that are happening. So again, if you want to learn more about both of these things, we've shared the link of session one in the chat, and you can go back and review that. And now moving forward and from here on forth through our journey, what we're going to do is we're going to follow the journey of a typical customer going through this process, right? And this is kind of based on a real life example that we worked on with our live customer. And this customer was a mid-size retail chain. They had around 50 stores, like physical stores, all across Canada. And then they had a pretty heavy e-commerce platform as well. And the challenges they were facing are kind of similar to what we already discussed, right? They had very siloed system and separate data sources, right? They had their CRM, the POS systems. They had like some third-party data they were bringing in. So all of those systems were living on their own. There was no, you know, integration between the data, and really that led to the second thing that we have identified as um, the analytics and the insights were very limited to the business units, and there was no cohesion between them, right? So they could not react pretty quickly to customer trends, market demands, or even issues arose. It was very hard for them to trace it back to what they need to be doing. And of course, because they did not have any cohesive systems that had the data security risks that are inherent with that. So at the end of session one, right, where we kind of left this customer is that they used AIS. They connected all their separate systems that they had, their e-commerce, their CRM, the POS data, their financial data, and they consolidated all of that data and they put it into one lake. So this really is the step one that they completed, and that kind of brings us to where we are today for this session. Is now that you have all your data in one place, what do you do with it, and where do you go from there? So from this point, I'll hand it off to Neha to talk about what OneLake is, what Fabric is, and how you can use that once you're in there. So, Neha, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Vaibhav. It's great to be here. Excited to share how, with your data in OneLake, you can leverage Microsoft Fabric to sort of clean, prep, and manage it seamlessly. We've got a bunch of different experiences in Fabric that I'll kind of walk you through over this session. I wanted to just set the tone by starting off with what a typical journey when it comes to adopting Fabric looks like. So the goal of Fabric is really to make data accessible, and this represents that typical customer journey, right? So we talked a lot about this. Vaibhav kind of outlined this a little bit as well. The first step is really establishing that central repository for all of your data, right? Most organizations have various different analytic systems. Some of that could be specialized or disconnected services, and all of that is, as we know, right? Like it's a problem because if there's garbage in, we're going to see garbage out, especially as you think about machine learning, AI, and all of those other applications in the future. As businesses build more modern data capabilities, it's increasingly important to sort of bring all of those disparate sources together and unify your data into one single source. So that's the very first step, and OneLake is absolutely critical to getting that in order and having a centralized repository. The second piece here is really preparing the data for something like ML and AI. And for that, we need it to be as accurate as possible. And we need to make sure that we leverage built-in capabilities within Fabric to clean that data. Maybe it's in a semi-structured way. Maybe there's unstructured data that you're not currently making use of. That's where Fabric really plays a key role. It's a perfect platform to help prepare your data for sort of building custom AI on top of it. So this is how I see that journey. And then, of course, over the course of the last, few decades, we've seen that evolution in data architecture as well, right? So because of this concept of Lakehouse being introduced in early 2020s, we've moved away from a data warehouse, at potentially multiple different data lakes to house all of your semi-structured and unstructured data, to then combining it into what we call the modern lakehouse, right? So modern lakehouse architecture is going to help you bring the best of both worlds together. So the scalability and flexibility of a data lake with the performance of a traditional data warehouse. This architecture is going to help you manage your growing data volumes while also maintaining the level of performance that's required for analytics. So OneLake is at the core of Fabric. It's the single data lake. It's a lake house essentially for Fabric for the entire organization. You get to see everything under a single pane of glass, and it helps to eliminate data duplication and silos, right? So how OneLake works is really by making sure it's open at every level. So it's built on top of ADLS Gen 2. We talked a little bit about Data Lake. That's what it's built on top of, and it can support any file type. So structured or unstructured data, semi-structured data. A lot of this you might not already be making use of anyway, because unstructured data, traditionally we had data lakes, you'd have to set that up. Perhaps that's data that you haven't actually looked at making use of. So now you're able to actually get it all under a single pane of glass. That's where all of your data would sit. And all Fabric data is automatically stored into OneLake in the Delta Parquet format. So Fabric data will go into OneLake, whether data is loaded into a lakehouse with Apache Spark or traditional, transactional data warehouse with T-SQL. Every single one of those pieces is going to lie in the same data lake. That makes sure that you have portability of the data, accessibility as well across the different engines, right? So give you a quick view of what that might look like a little bit later. But if you think about your data scientists and your data engineers, they're going to require different engines to be able to talk to that data and to work with that data, right? So making sure that it's open, it sits in that Delta Parquet format, that allows every one of those roles to interact with the data in the way that they need to at the stage of that sort of data journey. Another way to think about OneLake as well is to think of it as OneDrive for your data, right? So just like OneDrive, you can actually explore OneLake data from Windows if you have like File Explorer. You'd have to just install a plugin. You can navigate all of your workspaces and each of your data items and then easily start to like upload, manage, download, modify files, just like you do with Office. So it's extremely easy to kind of navigate the data that's sitting in one lake. And then with that sort of overview as well, there's ways to organize one lake as well as you kind of set up your Fabric environment. But I'm gonna quickly pause there, give you guys a quick sizzle video to watch, so you know how to unify your vision with Microsoft Fabric. Awesome. So Fabric, as you sort of saw in that video, very intuitive user experience, similar to what you're likely familiar with Power BI. And we believe it's unique in four ways, right? It's a complete analytics platform that gives you open source tools for your data scientists, your engineers, your BI professionals in a single SaaS platform or a SaaS solution. And it also provides you with sort of end-to-end security to back that up. So security, governance, and data management capabilities are built into sort of every layer of Fabric, so you can kind of track and audit how that data moves and the changes that are made, and then also builds, you know, a catalog and all of that that needs to be set up around it, leveraging some of our other products. And the second way that it's unique is it's lake centric and it's open. So we talked a bit about One Lake, but essentially we're embracing that open source, that open source data format like Delta Parquet, data processing frameworks as well, like Apache Spark for data engineers. And in terms of the user experience, very closely tied with Power BI, deeply integrated into the platform, right? Power BI essentially was the starting point, and then we kind of built around it. So all of that is very intuitive. And the data is actually seamlessly integrated into our other tools as well. So the power of the Microsoft platform is to be able to leverage this data platform and really integrate it into things like Excel, Teams, PowerPoint, SharePoint. So wherever your users sit, whatever it is that they're using to be able to access some of this, and especially being more proactive with some of the data instead of having to go to dashboards, that's really where we're starting to meet your users at the end of the day so that they have a better experience when it comes to making sense of the data that's available, some of the insights that you might be hoping to drive from the data that exists. And then all of the permissions flow end to end within Fabric. And so that people that have access or should only have access to specific files, that's all of the data that they see when they're logging into Fabric. So the promise here really is that we will have, you know, user access. We've got setup controls and security and permissions that kind of flow end to end so that you're able to have access at the file level. And that kind of helps to inform who has access to what. And that way you have everything organized from a user experience perspective. The fourth promise really that we commit to as well with Fabric is all of the AI capabilities that are built in, right? So you've seen Microsoft 365 Copilot and some of our other Copilot experiences. We have Copilot built into Fabric as well. It's built into every single one of the Fabric experiences just to ensure that you have someone there to accelerate that development and to help with your data journey to drive some of that forward. So it just helps you sort of fact check certain things, maybe even explore the data a little bit faster, build ML models around it, and just get working in the way that you need to, and be able to do your work a lot quicker. An industry best practice when it comes to organizing the lake house that we have, the One Lake, is really to leverage the medallion architecture. So this is a data design pattern that's really used to organize data logically in the lakehouse and improve data quality overall as it sort of moves through the different layers that you see on the screen here. So the architecture typically has 3 layers: bronze, silver, and gold, as you kind of see. And the bronze layer is really the landing zone for all of your data. So this is data that's raw, it's stored in its original format. This is where no changes are made. You essentially get every single thing landing in the lake house in the bronze layer that's completely raw. And the reason for this too is you have your semi-structured data and your unstructured data here as well, right? So if you're not using it at the moment, just getting it there in the bronze layer is going to be a big, it's just going to be a task that's going to take you a long way, a lot further than most organizations, just because that way you can start to leverage it in those later stages, whether it's enriching it, using some AI models, perhaps cognitive services, to be able to make sense of some of your unstructured data. So imagine imaging, right? So if you have images that you need to make sense of, if you're a healthcare organization, you'd go through that, perhaps use Azure AI models, scan through some of those imaging, and then be able to make sense of it. So the bronze layer has various different things there, and it doesn't just talk to structured data there. The silver layer is a little bit different. We also call it the validated layer, if you will. This is where you're going to validate and refine your data. So you take what's in the bronze layer and you're going to start to look at some of the structured data specifically, and you're going to look at the typical activities that happen here, like combining, merging, enforcing some data validation rules, right? Maybe you're getting rid of duplicates, you're removing null items. That's where the data is then going to be a consistent format so that every other team that you have, whether it be HR, finance, and different teams across the organization, they have that single source of truth to then go and access and use for their own needs when it comes to analytics and different items that they need to dig into. Now, the gold layer is sort of that enriched layer, as we like to call it. It's where the data undergoes further refinement from that silver layer, right? So we're going to look at specific business needs, in this case, specific analytics needs, and what the decision makers really want to get out of this data. And that's where you're going to aggregate your data to a particular metric or granularity, and then you're going to enrich it with maybe external information, right? So this is where it all starts to come together. It's not necessarily just a set format or a consistent format. It's now looking at that business need and what your decision makers are trying to answer. And that's where your gold layer comes in. So data sets in this layer are high quality. They're optimized for tools like Power BI. And really, it's data that's going to be presented as insights for your decision maker. Anything that's in the silver layer, just for perspective, is what you want to use for things like ML. So when you start doing machine learning, you don't want to use data in the gold layer. That's why this is broken up. And that's actually why this is an industry best practice as we move into this sort of era of ML, predictive modeling, as well as AI, because we want to use things that are in the silver layer rather than the gold layer, because we want the machine learning and the AI to be more intuitive, right? We do want it to see some of the errors. We want to get it in a consistent format, but we also wanted to see some of the peaks and valleys. We wanted to see outliers. We wanted to see certain patterns that maybe we can't identify. And then the bronze layer, that's where you'll leverage data that maybe is unstructured. You don't necessarily need to cleanse it, but you might be able to put in a specific format and then leverage it for maybe something like scanning images and stuff like that. So really depends what it is you're trying to do, but that's sort of why we have that best practice and why it's sort of separated into these 3 categories. And then Fabric in general, under the hood, these are all of the different runtimes, as we like to call it, or core workloads and engines that we have available. So there's 7 core workloads with Fabric. It's going to look at everything from data factory. So this is your ingestion, data engineering. That's where you're cleansing the data warehousing for storage. You can use either a warehouse for very strict sort of schema data, right? And then you can use the one lake or a lake house for, the data lake portion if there's something that's unstructured or something that you need to float. Then there's a data science experience for your machine learning as well as real-time intelligence. This is more to do with IoT or streaming data. So that's something to keep in mind. And then Power BI, of course, for visualization. So this entire sort of set of services or workloads is what you have access to with Fabric. And then it's all Copilot built into every single one of these experiences. OneLake being that storage layer, that backend. So even if you have a data warehouse that's sitting in the OneLake, that's just perspective, right? So it's just a different way of interacting with it, different engine. And then at the very bottom, we've got Microsoft Purview. This is a tool that's going to help sort of bring everything together from a governance perspective. So, yes, we have security built in. Yes, we have governance built in. When you're thinking about how do I have a working group that I put together where we have a data catalog and we're starting to establish some data governance practices, Purview is going to be the one that helps you with this and is deeply integrated within Fabric. So this is to help you visualize just role-specific experiences. If I were to just couple together some of those engines and services. So data factory, data engineering, that's for data engineers at the very beginning of that data journey. Then when you're looking to enrich that data and it's been transformed and cleaned and prepped, you go to a data scientist, and this is of course optional because I know a lot of organizations are still looking at maybe getting to predictive modeling. But once you're there, you'd be looking at data warehousing, data science experiences. And then, of course, the analysts and business users are going to be looking at things like real-time intelligence, if it's IoT or streaming data, and then Power BI, if it's, of course, for any visualizations, right? So serving up analytics to any of your business users. And then you've got OneLake, Purview. That would be for your data stewards, for your governance teams as well. I'm going to show you a quick video of the actual user experience interacting with some of the services. And this was actually recorded with one of our CSAs or cloud solution architects, Amir. So he's going to walk you through an end-to-end with some of the different solutions that I talked about in Fabric. And it just gives you a good idea of how you'd interact with some of those engines and services. Awesome. So 7 core workloads. Amir went through some of these, but essentially in Fabric, you're looking at data factory, data engineering, the data warehouse experience, data science, real-time intelligence, and Power BI. Today, we're going to focus on particular ones that help you to transform, clean, and prep the data, as well as the enrichment piece, which falls under data science mainly. So with Data Factory, just as an introduction, this is the core of just being able to transform your data, bring data into the platform. So it does natively have over 200 connectors. So if you have third-party applications or tools, I know some of that you might have already looked at the previous session where AIS helps you do this. Data Factory is one of the tools that helps you as well. Has pre-built connectors as well built into Fabric. So if there's something that you weren't able to build or bring in, this helps you bring on-prem data into Fabric, build pipelines, and ensure that you have data flows that go straight into your lakehouse. You can also build automations as well so that it's not manual, and you're able to just have that fully integrated service that allows you to connect to the data source. And then the next kind of stage of that, once the data is together, it's integrated, it's flowing into your bronze layer, you want to perform advanced transformations, right? So this may not always be the case, but likely is most of the time. So with your data engineering experience, Fabric is really built on the Spark-based environment, right, to help you prepare, transform, and enrich it for downstream use. We do leverage notebooks. So notebooks is essentially just able to help you write custom code, whether it be Python, R, or Scala, right, to perform these transformations. And then you can collaborate as well with other team members, with your colleagues in real time to update those within that data engineering experience. This is an architecture under the hood. This is what a typical end-to-end scenario in with a lakehouse looks like. So the data flows to your lakehouse. You can then leverage notebooks to sort of create those transformations. You also have the option to use low-code experiences like data flows. That would be part of your data factory that I mentioned in the beginning, to just help perform some key, very simple transformations to before you expose it to that next stage. You would then save the transformations, bring it back into the lakehouse. That would go into your silver layer, and then you would then go into your bronze and so on. So this is just to give you an idea of how that flow works from your data perspective. You'd have the ingestion tools. You'd come into the lakehouse. Once it's in bronze, you do transformations either using Data Factory or notebooks, and then you would save that into your silver layer for further processing. The last piece of that data journey, just around enrichment, is data science, right? So this is where if you have large volumes of data and you're looking to unlock deeper insights, especially moving towards predictive analytics, you have this experience to build, deploy, and operationalize machine learning models, right? So in this case, you've seen what an end-to-end scenario looks like with sort of data engineering. If we were to add this as a layer, once you've cleaned and prepped your data in notebooks, the silver layer is stored. You then want to actually go and run experiments in data science, right? So seamlessly fits into that process. It also helps you to enrich your data in that silver layer using experiments and then building ML models on top of it, just to make sure that you can store that in the future for Lakehouse for further iterations for predictions, and then also serving that to decision makers. But that's sort of that flow that you would expect. And then from there, you'd clean it up, have that insight be presented in some sort of dashboard or something in Power BI and expose it to that endpoint. So that's just a brief overview of sort of Fabric and all of its capabilities and how it can help you transform the data, prep that data, and really manage the environment there. I'm going to hand it off to Vaibhav to just discuss the complete customer journey and how these components come together, and then open to any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Neha. So I just want to bring us back to, if there we go, the customer journey that we kind of introduced at the start of this session. So when we had first kind of started this session, right, where the customer was, they all they had done was they had consolidated all their data and then just put it into one lake, right? And now, as Neha has kind of walked us through all the capabilities of Fabric and everything they can do, we can take a look at what that looks like in a practical implementation, right? And what that enabled this customer to do. So they they were able to take, so they incorporated all the data that they had from their stores, right? The POS data, the CRM data. They had some IoT sensors, and then they had their financial data. So once everything is all in one place and they can enrich it, what they were able to do is, for instance, the IoT sensor data, right? Originally, all they were using that was to figure out the hotspots in their stores, right? But once they're able to look at it over time and look at the trends, they can then figure out what typically tends to be their peak times, their operation times, right? They can then link that with their POS data to see how customers behave when during off times or peak times, right? What are the products that sell in different times? They were also then able to add in and bring in, weather data, right? And then kind of map that to their store operations and see how people behave under different weather conditions and weather patterns, right? Do different things sell? How does the footfall change? And then they also took, paired it with demographic data to kind of build out a much better understanding of their customers, to kind of see, how different sets of people behave and buy. So all of that allowed them to do was not only, optimize their current operations, but their data team could then also use the data science capabilities to build out and model future behavior or behaviors under other scenarios, which they then used to grow their business or open up when they're opening up new stores in areas where they don't have historical data. They were able to rely on all this modeling, right? So what all of this allowed them to do was, so they had all this data all this while, right? This was not new data. It was just, it allowed them to unlock the true potential and value of all this data, right? When all this data was sitting in separate systems and everyone was looking at it just from their view, there was still some value that they were getting for that one business unit. But when you put it all together, how that cohesive, holistic view really helped the business is something that really we want to really highlight here, right? And that's what Fabric really allows you to do. With all the tools that we saw here today, the kind of the possibilities are pretty much endless of what you can do with it. And now, what we want to do next time, right, in the next session that we'll have, and Neha will be joining us back for that, is that once you have all of this data and you've kind of also started, actioning it, the next step is how do you expose this to your customers and to your internal users so that they can use that and kind of get the insights and analytics for themselves as well, right? Because that then opens up a whole new kind of areas of improvement and optimizations as well. Because obviously there is value in you building out and kind of evaluating the data, but then how the end customers want to use that opens up a whole new world as well. So that's something we'll cover in the next session, which will be more, Neha, like I said, will be joining us back about how we unlock the value of the data once we've kind of enriched it and transformed it. And that will really cover, Power BI, Copilot, and how those tools can really be used to kind of go forward from this step in the journey. So that kind of brings us to the end of this session. We do have a few questions here, which we can quickly address. And if there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Um, I think, Neha, are you able to see the questions? Otherwise,
I am, yeah. So the first one I think is around the domains specifically, right? So domains in Fabric, they help enable sort of this data mesh experience. And that's going to help you just provide ownership and governance for specific business areas. So you can kind of group whatever's in your one lake so that it doesn't turn into a swamp, right? We want to stay organized. And that's going to help you look at HR, what are the data sets that they need access to, finance, what do they need access to, and so on. So that's just an example of how you can kind of build those domains. And that's typically a data mesh experience, right? So you want to have data sets that are managed and owned by those domain teams rather than allowing IT or different teams with a vast amount of like management overhead. So that's what domains help with. That's an approach you can definitely take across the entire environment. The way that you should think about how it applies to different layers of the medallion architecture is think of domains as a broader sort of user experience when you come into Fabric. So if I'm an HR employee, I would log in, you would actually see a little toggle at the very top. It would say HR, and you can change that experience. You can go HR to finance. If you have access to that, you'll be able to see all of those data artifacts and projects that exist. And then from that storage, what you could do is inside, think of it as the medallion architecture is not workspaces, it's actually different lake houses. So yes, one lake is our storage layer, and we call it one lake because you have that one storage environment. But within that, you can have multiple lake houses, you can have multiple different warehouses, right? So you can create a lake house for the bronze layer, you would create a lake house for your silver layer, you would create a lake house for your gold layer. And that's how I would think about separating domains from how it interacts with the medallion architecture in those different layers. And that would be the best practice. So creating a lakehouse for each stage in that data journey under each domain. So maybe finance has bronze silver layer, HR has a separate bronze silver layer, and those are three different lakehouses under that domain experience. So that's how I would think about it. Workspaces, the only time you want to kind of start separating workspaces is really different functions. So you can do that if you don't do domains. That's really up to you. There's multiple ways of organizing. But you can also separate that for things like prod and then dev test, right? So if there's things that you're testing out, if you want to separate those environments, I would just separate that out into different workspaces. So that's how I would think about those three, I guess, management functions there.
Awesome. Thanks, Neha. Um, I don't see any other questions. As we did mention at the start, if you guys do have any other questions that you think of later, feel free to reach out to us in the email in the chat, and we will respond to those. And then just a reminder for the next session that's going to be coming up, which is going to be around all around Power BI and Copilot. That will be held on January 23rd. It's the same time as this one, 2 p.m. EST at 11 a.m. PST. The link to register for that one is also in the chat. And another thing I just want to remind everyone is that we are offering eligible attendees a free evaluation workshop as well. If any of you want to explore further how any of the things that we've spoken about so far, whether it be AIS or Fabric, how those can be useful to you or your organization, please feel free to reach out, and we can set up that session for you guys. And if there is nothing else, oh, maybe I think there is another post.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think one more
yeah, one more
question.
question. Yeah, about Git integration and
For sure. I won't be able to speak to the unsupported items at the time just because there's stuff on the roadmap. But we can dive a little bit, maybe deeper into it on a separate follow-up. But just as an overview, if you are looking to integrate with Git, you would just connect your workspace to a Git repository. That would just make sure that every single artifact that's in there, pipelines, notebooks, data flows, you can track, essentially any changes that are made, editing, and essentially allow you to audit some of that, change back to the main branch after you review it, things like that. So we're working on some of those unsupported items, perhaps, Rovena, that you're suggesting, and then also the CI/CD integrations as well, some of those automated testing and deployment changes. It was introduced, I believe, a few months ago, so we're still working on updates there for how to deploy that seamlessly and work on those pieces.
excellent. All right. I believe that covers everything. Rowena, thanks for your questions. If you do still have more, questions or want to continue that discussion, please feel free to reach out and we can arrange that for you as well. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in the next session on January 23rd. Thanks, everyone. And thanks again,
Thank you,
Neha, for
guys.
your time today.
Take care.